Tell me that isn't another wolf cub, Damien Ashford muttered under his breath, already knowing the answer he was about to hear. And the answer came exactly as expected. Tiny Werewolf, the deep, confident voice of his inner wolf declared with absolute certainty. Lost. Hungry. Needs the pack. Damien closed his eyes for half a second as the Royal Council continued discussing harvest reports around the long oak table. Outside the towering windows of Silver Hollow Palace, the first warm light of spring spilled across the mountains, painting the forests in shades of emerald and gold. It should have been another ordinary morning for the Alpha King, ruler of the largest werewolf kingdom in the north, respected by every neighboring pack and admired for his calm judgment. Instead, all of his attention had been stolen by a tiny orange cat strolling proudly across the palace courtyard with its tail held high. His wolf sighed dramatically. Look at that brave little one. So fearless. Damien rubbed the bridge of his nose. It's a cat. The wolf ignored him completely. Tiny Werewolf. Damien had lost this argument hundreds of times over the last 3 years. Nobody knew exactly how or when it had started. One rainy afternoon, his wolf had spotted a soaked black kitten hiding beneath an abandoned wagon and instantly become convinced that every cat in existence was simply a miniature werewolf waiting for the day it would finally grow into its true form. No scholar, healer, elder, or magical expert had managed to change that belief. The kingdom's wisest historian once spent nearly 2 hours explaining the biological differences between wolves and cats using ancient scrolls. His wolf had listened politely before replying, "Interesting story. Still tiny werewolves." Since then, Damien had quietly forbidden anyone from bringing the subject up again. It was less embarrassing for everyone involved. "Your Majesty?" Lord Harrison asked carefully. Damien blinked and realized the council chamber had gone silent. 12 pairs of eyes waited for his decision regarding new trade routes. "Approved," Damien answered automatically. Harrison frowned. "I haven't explained the proposal yet." Damien cleared his throat. "Then perhaps you should start with that." A few restrained smiles appeared around the table. Everyone assumed the Alpha King was distracted by affairs of state. Nobody suspected the real reason. Outside, the orange cat stretched lazily beneath a flowering maple tree. Damien felt his wolf swell with unmistakable pride. "See, practicing battle movements. Very promising. That's called stretching." "Same thing." Before Damien could continue arguing, another scent drifted through the open windows, fresh wildflowers mixed with cedar and something quietly comforting. His wolf became instantly alert. Someone is protecting the cub. Damien followed the scent into the courtyard below. A young woman knelt beside the little orange cat with gentle patience, offering it a shallow bowl of water before checking one tiny paw. Her light brown hair shimmered beneath the morning sun, while several other neighborhood cats wandered toward her without hesitation. One gray cat climbed onto her shoulder as though it had known her forever. Another curled comfortably beside her boots. "Impossible," Damien whispered. His wolf sounded awestruck. "She's their guardian. The keeper of the lost wolf cubs. We have to thank her." Damien stared at the scene from the palace window while the woman smiled softly as another cat rubbed against her hand. He had never seen her before, yet every animal around her behaved as if they trusted her completely. His wolf's excitement grew stronger with every passing second. "Find her," it insisted. "She belongs with our smallest pack members." Damien exhaled slowly, already sensing that his peaceful morning had just disappeared, because whenever his wolf became this certain about something, the entire kingdom somehow ended up involved. Damien left the council chamber with measured steps that concealed the growing argument inside his own mind. The marble corridors of Silver Hollow Palace echoed softly beneath his boots while royal guards greeted him with respectful bows, unaware that their king was silently negotiating with an impossibly stubborn wolf. "She is feeding them," his wolf observed with unmistakable admiration. "She even knows which one likes. Fresh water first. That is leadership." Damien sighed. "She is simply kind. There is a difference." His wolf answered immediately. "Kindness is leadership." The words lingered longer than Damien expected. By the time he reached the palace gardens, the young woman was still there beneath the flowering maple tree. Morning sunlight filtered through the branches, scattering bright patches of gold across the stone pathway, while several cats wandered around her feet, with complete confidence. One tiny black kitten struggled to climb onto the wooden bench beside her, slipping twice before finally reaching the seat. The young woman laughed softly and gently stroked its head. Damien had faced rival alpha leaders without the slightest hesitation, yet somehow walking toward one ordinary citizen felt unexpectedly awkward. Before he could decide whether to introduce himself, his wolf became excited again. Careful, do not frighten the little ones. They are still learning pack customs. Damien almost turned around and walked back into the palace. Instead, he continued forward until the nearest cat noticed him. Rather than running away, the orange cat from earlier marched directly toward him with complete confidence. The tiny creature sat squarely in front of his polished boots and stared up with bright green eyes. His wolf practically beamed with pride. Fearless. Excellent spirit. Future warrior. It is 8 pounds at most, Damien replied silently. 8 pounds of determination. There is a difference. The young woman finally looked up, surprise flickering across her face before she quickly stood. She offered a polite curtsy, though one gray cat stubbornly remained balanced across her shoulders as if refusing to leave. Your Majesty, she said with genuine warmth rather than nervousness. I did not realize this part of the garden belonged to the palace. Damien shook his head. The gardens belong to everyone who respects them. Her smile appeared naturally, bright enough to soften the quiet morning around them. Then I suppose your gardeners deserve most of the credit. The flowers seem very happy here. Damien noticed she complimented the flowers before the palace itself. Somehow that felt honest. I am Clara Bennett, she continued. I volunteer at the village animal shelter just outside the eastern gate. Some of these little visitors seem to think the palace serves the best breakfast in the kingdom. One by one the cats gathered closer to Clara as though responding to an invisible invitation. Even the shy black kitten cautiously approached, curling around her ankle. His wolf watched the scene with complete satisfaction. They trust her because she understands them. Damien folded his arms. You appear to know each one by name. Clara nodded. That is Oliver. The orange one is Maple. The tiny black kitten is Pepper. The gray fellow on my shoulder decided yesterday that personal space is optional. Damien could not stop the faint smile that escaped. Pepper suddenly wandered toward him and lightly bumped against his boot before looking up with a hopeful expression. His wolf nearly shouted with excitement. The cub accepts us. We are officially family now. Damien glanced at Clara, who was trying very hard not to laugh at the completely bewildered expression on her king's face. And for the first time in many months, the weight of the crown felt strangely lighter. The palace should have returned to its usual rhythm after that morning. But Damien quickly discovered that peace had become impossible. Every time he signed a decree, approved a shipment, or listened to another noble discussing taxes, his wolf interrupted with the same unwavering determination. Have you checked on the little ones today? Damien tried to ignore the question until the royal librarian politely repeated her own. Your Majesty, should this collection of ancient maps be preserved in the Eastern Archive? Damien looked up absent-mindedly. Yes, and make certain the tiny werewolves have enough blankets. Silence swallowed the room. The librarian blinked twice. Your Majesty? Damien immediately cleared his throat. The village shelter. I meant the village shelter. The librarian bowed with admirable professionalism, though Damien could have sworn she was hiding a smile as she quietly excused herself. His wolf sounded completely satisfied. Good idea. Young cubs should always stay warm. By late afternoon, Damien finally surrendered. He dismissed the remaining meetings and rode alone toward the eastern gate, telling the palace guards he wished to inspect local conditions. That explanation was technically true, although his destination had much less to do with the village than with one particular caretaker. The shelter rested beside a gentle stream where tall oak trees offered cool shade against the spring sun. It was smaller than Damien had imagined, built from weathered stone and polished cedar, surrounded by flower boxes overflowing with lavender and daisies. The peaceful atmosphere felt completely different from the formal halls of the palace. Before Damien even reached the entrance, several familiar cats wandered out to greet him. Maple confidently trotted ahead, while Pepper bounced after the older cat with clumsy enthusiasm. His wolf became almost unbearably pleased. They remembered us. Excellent memory for growing wolves. They are cats, Damien answered automatically, although his response lacked its usual confidence. Inside the shelter, Clara knelt beside a wooden table while carefully wrapping a tiny blue ribbon around a handmade scratching post. She looked up as the bell above the door chimed, surprise quickly giving way to an easy smile. "Your Majesty, I was not expecting another royal inspection." Damien glanced around the cozy room. Sunlight streamed through wide windows, warming baskets filled with sleeping kittens while older cats stretched lazily across handmade shelves. Everything smelled faintly of cedar, fresh herbs, and clean linen. "Neither was I," Damien admitted honestly. Clara laughed, the quiet sound somehow making the little shelter feel even brighter. "Well, you are welcome anyway." Pepper immediately climbed onto Damien's boot again, meowing proudly as if introducing him to the rest of the room. His wolf nearly glowed with happiness. "We have been accepted into their pack." Clara noticed Damien watching the tiny kitten. "He seems to like you very much," she said. Pepper is usually cautious around strangers. Damien slowly crouched until he was eye level with the little animal. Pepper reached forward and gently tapped one paw against his hand before curling into a comfortable ball beside his knee. "Perhaps," Damien said quietly, "he simply has very poor judgment." Clara tilted her head with playful curiosity. "Or perhaps he sees something everyone else misses." Those simple words lingered in Damien's thoughts far longer than he expected. As he stood, his wolf spoke with unusual seriousness instead of cheerful certainty. "She protects every small soul that finds her. We should protect her too." Damien did not argue this time. Watching Clara refill tiny water bowls while greeting every animal by name, he realized she spent her days caring for creatures that most people hurried past without a second glance. Whether they were cats or, in his wolf's impossible imagination, miniature werewolves, her kindness never changed. For reasons he could not fully explain, Damien found himself making a quiet promise. If Clara Bennett continued watching over the kingdom's smallest companions, then he would quietly make certain someone was watching over her. Over the next several days, Damien discovered that his quiet promise had created a problem far larger than he expected. His official schedule remained as demanding as ever, yet somehow every inspection, every walk through the capital, and every afternoon ride mysteriously carried him past Clara Bennett's little shelter. The palace staff assumed their king had suddenly developed an interest in village outreach. Only Damien knew the truth. His wolf was planning the routes. "We should check on the smallest pack members," his wolf insisted every morning with cheerful confidence. "They require regular visits from their king." Damien no longer bothered arguing. He simply accepted that resistance accomplished absolutely nothing. What surprised him even more was that Clara always seemed genuinely happy to see him. She never treated him like a distant ruler. Instead, she greeted him with the same warm smile she offered every visitor, whether they wore a royal cloak or a work apron dusted with flour from the nearby bakery. One bright afternoon, Damien arrived carrying a small wooden basket. Clara looked inside and laughed softly. "Fresh salmon?" she asked. Damien nodded. "The palace kitchen prepared more than we needed." Clara smiled knowingly. The palace kitchen, or someone with silver eyes who keeps inventing excuses to visit? Damien looked away for a moment. Perhaps both. His wolf sounded delighted. "She is clever. Excellent quality for a future pack leader." Damien silently ignored that comment while Clara divided the salmon into small portions. Within minutes, cats appeared from every direction as though they had been waiting for an invisible signal. Maple arrived first, followed by Pepper, then Oliver, and soon half a dozen unfamiliar faces emerged from beneath flower bushes, fences, and sunny windowsills. Damien watched with growing amazement as every cat calmly surrounded Clara. His wolf sounded almost emotional. "Look at them." She found more tiny werewolves. "The pack is growing beautifully." Damien counted quietly. "There were only 5 here last week." Clara nodded while gently scratching Pepper beneath the chin. Word travels quickly in the animal world. One safe place becomes known to another. Damien raised an eyebrow. "You were suggesting cats share addresses?" Clara laughed. "Not exactly. But kindness has a way of spreading farther than people expect." Damien looked around the little shelter. Every corner reflected careful thought. Fresh water stood in clean bowls. Small blankets rested inside cozy baskets. Wooden climbing shelves lined the walls. Even the garden outside contained tiny shaded spaces where older cats could nap peacefully. Nothing expensive, nothing grand. Just simple care given every single day. His wolf spoke with quiet certainty. She built a village for them. Damien found himself smiling. You have been busy. Clara shrugged modestly. A few neighbors donated wood. The carpenter down the road built those shelves. Mrs. Dawson knits blankets during the evenings. Children leave little toys outside the gate. She looked around with grateful eyes. It stopped being my shelter a long time ago. Now the whole village helps. Just then, Pepper proudly carried a tiny feather nearly twice his own size across the yard before dropping it directly at Damien's boots. His wolf gasped with admiration. He brought us a gift. We have been officially adopted. Clara covered her mouth to hide another laugh as Damien carefully picked up the feather. I believe, she said gently, he likes you very much. Damien looked at the tiny kitten, then at the growing circle of cats resting comfortably around Clara, and for the first time he wondered whether his wolf's impossible belief mattered as much as he had always assumed. Whether they were ordinary cats or imaginary little werewolves, they had quietly transformed a forgotten corner of the kingdom into the happiest place he had visited in years. The annual spring gathering transformed Silver Hollow Palace into the brightest place in the kingdom. Long banners fluttered between marble towers. Musicians filled the courtyards with cheerful melodies, and visitors from every neighboring village wandered through colorful gardens lined with blooming roses and freshly trimmed hedges. It was the one day each year when the palace gates remained open from sunrise until sunset, welcoming everyone to celebrate the changing season. Damien stood near the grand staircase greeting guests with practiced confidence, although his attention drifted every few minutes toward the palace gardens where Clara had been invited to organize a small adoption event for rescued cats. His wolf had been unusually excited since dawn. The smallest pack members are finally visiting the royal den, it announced proudly. They should feel welcome. Damien quietly accepted that arguing would accomplish nothing today. As the afternoon unfolded, children laughed while chasing bubbles across the lawn. Families admired the palace fountains, and merchants displayed handcrafted goods beneath white canvas tents. Everything felt peaceful until a familiar orange blur darted across the stone walkway. Maple had somehow escaped the adoption garden. Before anyone could react, the fearless little cat bounded up the broad staircase leading toward the ceremonial platform, where Damien's royal chair stood waiting for the evening address. Hundreds of visitors noticed at the same moment. A hush swept through the crowd as the tiny orange cat confidently leaped onto the wide velvet seat, circled once, and settled comfortably in the exact center as though it had ruled the kingdom for years. Damien froze. His wolf sounded deeply moved. He found his rightful place. Such courage, such noble instincts. A nearby palace attendant hesitated, unsure whether to remove the unexpected guest. Damien almost gave the order himself, but his wolf protested immediately. Absolutely not. The little warrior has claimed the lookout post. Let him finish his inspection. Clara arrived moments later, slightly out of breath, but smiling with embarrassed amusement. I am so sorry, Your Majesty, she said softly. Maple has always believed every chair belongs to him. Damien looked at the tiny orange cat, who stretched lazily across the royal cushion without the slightest concern for ceremony. Around the platform, several children began giggling. Their laughter spread naturally through the gathering until even visiting nobles smiled at the ridiculous sight. Damien realized no one felt offended. If anything, the unexpected moment had made the formal celebration feel warmer. His wolf sounded impossibly proud. See, everyone respects the little captain. Damien walked calmly toward the chair. Maple looked up at him, blinked once, then scooted exactly 6 inches to the side, as if politely offering the Alpha King enough room to share the seat. Clara covered her mouth to hide another laugh. I believe, she whispered, he has decided you are trustworthy. Damien slowly sat beside the tiny cat instead of moving him. The courtyard erupted into gentle applause and cheerful laughter. Maple purred happily, completely unaware that he had just turned the kingdom's most formal ceremony into its most memorable one. Damien looked toward Clara, whose bright smile reflected genuine relief, and for a brief moment he forgot about royal traditions altogether. His wolf spoke with complete satisfaction. The smallest warrior welcomed us home. Damien shook his head with quiet amusement. Perhaps, he thought, Some moments were simply too wonderful to correct, even when they made absolutely no sense. The morning after the spring gathering, Silver Hollow awakened to one unexpected consequence. The story of the Alpha King calmly sharing his royal chair with an orange cat had traveled across the kingdom faster than any official announcement. Bakers laughed while serving warm bread, merchants smiled behind their market stalls, and children proudly reenacted the scene with wooden toy cats balanced on tiny chairs. Damien had spent years earning a reputation as a wise and composed ruler, yet somehow one fearless little feline had made him even more beloved. His wolf sounded thoroughly pleased. Good. Everyone respects the smallest warriors now. Damien looked out the palace window toward the village below. Or perhaps everyone is laughing at me. His wolf answered without hesitation. Those are happy laughs. They count differently. Later that afternoon, Damien found himself returning to the shelter once again. Clara was arranging fresh flowers near the entrance when she noticed him approaching. She tilted her head with an amused smile that had become increasingly familiar. Your Majesty, she said, I was beginning to think you might secretly own this place. Damien smiled. I have started wondering the same thing. Before Clara could answer, Maple confidently trotted across the yard carrying a colorful ribbon in his mouth, while Pepper bounced behind him, trying unsuccessfully to steal the prize. Clara laughed as she picked Pepper up with gentle hands. Someone has become very brave lately. Damien reached out carefully, allowing the little kitten to sniff his fingers before Pepper settled comfortably against his palm. His wolf sounded delighted. Look how much he has grown. Soon he will lead tiny patrols. Clara watched Damien's expression with quiet curiosity. May I ask you something? Damien nodded. Of course. She hesitated only for a moment. Every single time one of the cats walks toward you, your face changes. Damien raised an eyebrow. Changes? Just for a second, Clara explained. You look surprised, then proud, then as though you were trying very hard not to smile. Damien could not think of a convincing answer. His wolf helpfully supplied one. Tell her they are family. Damien wisely ignored that suggestion. Clara laughed softly. I knew it. Knew what? You like them much more than you pretend. Damien finally admitted defeat. Perhaps I do. Clara gently placed Pepper back on the grass before folding her arms with playful satisfaction. Then I have an experiment. Before Damien could ask what she meant, Clara picked up Maple and carefully carried the relaxed orange cat toward him. Maple purred happily the entire way. Hold him, Clara suggested. Damien accepted the surprisingly warm bundle with careful hands. Maple immediately curled into a comfortable ball against his chest, as though he had practiced this moment for years. His wolf sounded almost overwhelmed with happiness. He trusts us completely. We must protect him forever. Damien could not help smiling. Clara watched the scene with bright eyes. There it is again, she whispered. That look. Damien glanced down at the peacefully sleeping cat before looking back at Clara. What look? The one that reminds me you are not thinking like a king. She smiled warmly. You are simply thinking like someone who wants every small creature to feel safe. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming lavender through the little garden while cats stretched lazily beneath the afternoon sunshine. Damien realized something surprising. His wolf had stopped talking entirely. Instead, there was only a quiet feeling of contentment that settled comfortably inside him. Finally, the wolf spoke again, softer than ever before. She understands our heart, even if she does not understand our tiny werewolves. Damien looked at Clara's gentle smile, and, for the first time, he wondered whether his wolf might have recognized something important long before he had. Not everyone in Silver Hollow shared Damien's unusual patience. Within a week, whispers about the palace cats had reached the royal advisors, and curiosity finally overcame their restraint. One sunny afternoon, the kingdom's most respected scholars, healers, and elders gathered in the palace library for what Lord Harrison politely described as an educational discussion. Damien already knew exactly how the meeting would end. His wolf sounded completely unconcerned. They finally wished to learn about tiny werewolves. How wonderful. Damien quietly sighed. Across the room, Professor Alden carefully unrolled an enormous illustrated encyclopedia filled with detailed drawings of wolves, cats, foxes, and dozens of other woodland animals. Beside him stood the royal healer carrying anatomical charts, while Elder Miriam balanced an impressive stack of books that looked older than the palace itself. Clara had been invited as well, though she seemed more curious than anyone else. "Your Majesty," Professor Alden began kindly, "we have prepared a simple presentation." Damien almost laughed. "For me?" "Not exactly." The professor smiled awkwardly. "More for your unique perspective." Clara immediately realized what was happening and lowered her eyes to hide an amused smile. The first chart displayed a large gray wolf beside a small orange cat. "As you can clearly see," the professor explained, "wolves and cats belong to different families." Damien remained silent. His wolf waited politely until the explanation finished. Then it answered with complete confidence. "The little one is simply younger." Professor Alden continued undeterred. He pointed toward paw prints, ears, tails, whiskers, and body size, explaining each difference with remarkable patience. His wolf listened carefully before reaching exactly the same conclusion. "Tiny werewolf. Excellent disguise." Elder Miriam stepped forward next. "Perhaps behavior will help." She described how cats purred, climbed trees, chased butterflies, and slept in sunny windows while wolves traveled in organized packs. Damien felt his wolf becoming even more convinced. "See, they practiced different skills before joining the larger pack. Excellent training program." Clara bit her lip, trying very hard not to laugh aloud. The royal healer made one final attempt by carrying Pepper into the library. The tiny kitten looked around curiously before climbing into Clara's lap without hesitation. "Observe," the healer said gently. "This is simply a cat." Pepper stretched, yawned, and began purring loudly enough for everyone to hear. The room fell completely silent. Damien already knew what was coming. His wolf sounded absolutely delighted. Listen to that confident little howl. Very advanced for such a young werewolf. Several advisors exchanged defeated glances. Lord Harrison slowly removed his glasses and rubbed his forehead. Professor Alden quietly rolled up every chart he had brought. Elder Miriam simply closed her oldest book with a soft sigh. Clara could no longer hold back her laughter. It started as one quiet giggle before growing into bright, cheerful laughter that filled the library with warmth instead of embarrassment. Damien looked at her smiling face and unexpectedly laughed as well. One by one, the advisors joined in until the entire room echoed with friendly amusement. No one felt frustrated anymore. The impossible debate had somehow become its own tradition. Clara gently stroked Pepper's head before looking toward Damien with sparkling eyes. "I think," she said between soft laughs, "some mysteries are happier when they remain unsolved." Damien smiled. "I believe you may be right." His wolf sounded wonderfully satisfied. "They are making progress. Someday, everyone will understand." Damien did not bother correcting him. Looking around the room at scholars laughing beside healers, elders smiling beside children, and one tiny kitten peacefully asleep in Clara's arms, he realized that perhaps being wrong had never brought so many people together before. Several peaceful weeks passed before Silver Hollow received an unexpected reminder that even the smallest moments could change an entire day. The palace gardeners had been preparing a new flower garden near the eastern courtyard, carefully arranging young rose bushes, herbs, and bright spring blossoms that would welcome visitors throughout the summer. Clara had volunteered to help choose plants that would be safe for curious animals, while Damien quietly offered to carry supplies despite repeated protests that the king should not be moving wheelbarrows. His wolf sounded delighted by the assignment. "We are helping build a better home for the little ones." Damien smiled to himself as he lifted another crate of flowering lavender. Around them, Maple supervised from the top of a stone wall, while Pepper chased drifting butterflies with endless determination. Everything felt wonderfully ordinary until every cat in the garden suddenly stopped moving at exactly the same moment. Maple's ears lifted. Pepper froze beside a flower pot. 3 older cats sitting beneath a bench all turned toward the same narrow hedge. Clara noticed it immediately. "That is strange," she whispered. Damien followed their gaze. "What are they looking at?" Before anyone could answer, every cat hurried toward the hedge together. Not frantically, not fearfully, but with surprising purpose. Clara walked after them, while Damien stayed close behind. His wolf sounded unusually confident. The tiny werewolves found something important. Behind the thick row of shrubs, nearly hidden beneath fresh leaves, sat a small wooden basket that no one had noticed earlier that morning. Inside rested 4 frightened newborn kittens wrapped carefully in a warm blanket beside a handwritten note asking someone kind to care for them, because their owner could no longer do so. Clara gently picked up the basket, her eyes filling with quiet compassion. Someone loved them enough to leave them where they knew they would be safe. Damien looked around the peaceful garden. No one had heard the basket being placed there. No guard had reported anything unusual. Yet somehow every cat in the palace had discovered the tiny family within minutes. His wolf sounded incredibly proud. I told you, the little ones always protect their own. Clara carefully carried the basket toward the shelter, while Maple proudly walked in front as though leading an important parade. Pepper bounced beside the older cat with unmistakable excitement. Villagers who passed along the road stopped to smile at the unusual procession. By the time they reached the shelter, neighbors had already begun arriving with soft blankets, tiny bottles, warm milk, and handmade toys. No announcement had been sent. No royal order had been issued. Kindness simply spread from one person to another exactly as Clara had once described. Damien watched the growing crowd with thoughtful eyes. You were right, he said quietly. Clara looked up. About what? Kindness really does travel farther than people expect. She smiled warmly. It always has. Damien glanced down at Maple, who sat proudly beside the little basket as if standing guard over its newest residents. His wolf spoke with calm satisfaction instead of playful certainty. Perhaps they are tiny werewolves. Perhaps they are simply cats. Either way, every small heart deserves a place where it feels safe. Damien stood silently for a long moment before looking at Clara. For the first time, he realized his wolf had stopped trying to prove anything. It simply wanted every forgotten creature to find a home, and somehow Clara had been teaching that lesson all along. By the time summer arrived, Silver Hollow had quietly changed in ways no royal decree could have accomplished. The little shelter beside the eastern gate had grown into a beautiful sanctuary filled with climbing trees, sunny windows, flower gardens, and cozy wooden cottages built by volunteers from every corner of the kingdom. Carpenters donated their weekends. Bakers delivered fresh bread to the volunteers each morning. Children painted cheerful signs while elderly neighbors sewed colorful blankets. Nobody called it a royal project. They simply called it home. Damien stood beside Clara at the entrance one peaceful afternoon, watching Maple proudly patrol the stone path, while Pepper, no longer the tiny kitten he had once been, confidently guided the newest arrivals toward fresh water and warm beds. His wolf observed the scene with unmistakable pride. They have become fine little guardians. Clara smiled as she looked across the lively sanctuary. I still cannot believe how many people wanted to help. Damien looked at her instead of the buildings. You inspired them long before I ever noticed. Clara shook her head gently. People only needed someone to remind them that kindness matters. Damien knew she was wrong. Kindness had always mattered. Clara simply made it impossible to ignore. A cheerful voice interrupted their conversation as several village children hurried through the gate, carrying handmade toys for the newest kittens. One little boy looked up at Damien with complete seriousness. Your Majesty, he asked, is it true that cats protect the kingdom? Damien glanced down at Maple, who was proudly watching a butterfly with absolute concentration, then at Pepper, who patiently allowed a younger kitten to steal his favorite ribbon without complaint. His wolf answered immediately. Of course they do. Damien smiled before replying aloud. I think they remind us to protect one another. That might be even more important. The children nodded as though that answer explained everything and happily ran toward the play garden. Clara looked at Damien with quiet admiration. That was a very wise answer. Damien chuckled softly. Do not tell anyone. As the afternoon sun settled lower across the hills, a familiar orange cat calmly leaped onto a large flat stone near the center of the sanctuary. One by one, every other cat wandered closer until dozens of them rested peacefully around Maple beneath the golden light. The entire scene looked strangely ceremonial. His wolf became wonderfully emotional. Look at them. The smallest pack has found its kingdom. Damien watched the peaceful gathering for a long moment before quietly asking the question he had never expected to say aloud. Tell me honestly, are they truly tiny werewolves? His wolf considered the question longer than usual. When it finally answered, its voice carried gentle warmth instead of playful certainty. Maybe they never were. Maybe they were simply tiny hearts that needed someone to believe they belonged. Damien felt a quiet smile spread across his face. Somehow that answer felt even better than the old one. Clara noticed his thoughtful expression. "What are you smiling about?" Damien looked at the sanctuary, at the families laughing together, at children playing beneath flowering trees, and at the cats peacefully resting in the afternoon sunshine. "I was just thinking," he said softly. "Sometimes believing something impossible leads you to something completely real." Clara slipped her hand gently into his, and neither of them felt the need to say another word. Nearby, Maple closed his eyes beneath the warm summer sky while Pepper curled beside him, and deep inside the Alpha King's heart, his faithful wolf settled comfortably at last. Forever convinced that the smallest members of their extraordinary little pack would always have a place to call home.